We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happened.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs, to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You love this black man!
We welcome you to episode 77 of College Sports Follow the Money, where we ask the questions, what's next? What's new? Sometimes we ask, what now? From the what's to the who's. Dr. Bowen Loftin, Jon Heidtke, join me, Andrew Monaco. So glad to be with you. Fellas, so glad to crank up another episode of this show. There's a lot that we get to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, it's hot outside, but hotter in some other places too right now, with Judge Wilkie making her final decision the day after our last podcast recording, and lots of scrambling going forward to the July 1 date when we start paying athletes to play. Things are really interesting right now, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are, John. It's the landmark decision can come down. Now, here come the ramifications, right? Because we were waiting for that date. Now it's a matter of how schools will execute.
Yeah, and I think just the early results are there's no one sticking to one particular playbook. They're all kind of evaluating it from different perspectives, which I think is going to be interesting to see how far and again how fast those rules get stretched through this process too.
A phrase that we will probably get used to. You're either going to hear revenue share or rev share, as now the colleges will allocate the dollars that are available to athletes. Dr. Loftin, you told us before that Texas Tech had their plan. Let that be public. Trev Alberts from Texas A&M spoke earlier this week about Texas A&M and how the Aggies will have rev share.
He did, and interesting differences. Trev had a pretty wide-ranging press conference, as you both know. That's been widely publicized, I think. A number of things came out of that. What didn't come out of it was how much people get. He specifically did something many schools have not chosen to do. He has limited the pay for play to 6 sports, 3 male and 3 female sports. Football, obviously, both basketball teams, along with the softball team and the the baseball team. So we have 3 male sports, basically. We have 3 female sports receiving all of the funding available from the $20.5 million settlement mandate. Now, what's interesting also, you mentioned what's also going on here is that the conferences have mandated, it's our conference, the SEC has mandated that $2.5 million of that $20.5 million in year one will be allocated to scholarships. And those are going to be ubiquitous. So we'll have basically every player covered with a scholarship. So in that sense, the money is going to everybody. But at the same time, he did not say how much was going to go to football, to basketball, men's and women's, to baseball, to volleyball, to softball. So 6 sports have been allocated. That's fewer than most I've heard about. Texas Tech many months ago announced their entire lineup, and everybody there gets something, although the non-revenue sports share a pretty small portion of that, with 75% going to football. And that seems to be sort of the right number around the country, as I hear right now. Most schools that have divulged what they're going to do the 75% plus or minus a little bit going to football seems to be pretty standard. It's somewhat divergent after that. I think that's interesting. Trev spent some time talking about other things, and we can visit that a bit. In particular, I was very intrigued by his answer to a question about the enforcement side of things. Deloitte is going to be in charge of investigating every contract for NIL over $600 per year, and they're going to determine whether that contract is real or not. But then the issue becomes, what are the consequences for not following that, for not obeying your contract? And that's where I think, Trev said there'll be consequences without mentioning what they really were. He just talked vaguely about the idea of eligibility being the carrot you put out in front of a student athlete to say, if you don't comply, this is what's going to happen. But I just don't know who is going to be investigating the thousands, literally thousands of contractual arrangements here beyond the contract itself being looked at. I can see that happening, and I think Deloitte will do that. But once we get past that stage of evaluating a contract, who is going to follow every single athlete and every single contractual agreement they have to see if it's being complied with? That's what I don't understand how that's going to be done.
Does this fall under the CSC, the College Sports Commission, that also emanated from all of this, now in conjunction, if you will? And I don't know if conjunction is the right word, but alongside the NCAA.
Presumably, they will be the ones allocating some type of penalties for this. But again, who is going to investigate? Who is going to follow a student athlete down to the car dealership to watch them sign autographs? Who's going to do that? That's what there's a few people working for Deloitte who are going to monitor the contracts. There's already an application being developed or in development, or even already done, perhaps.
They're already being used, Dr. Loftin, and a number have gone through. But if it's not the fair market NIL value, they're being kicked back out. And it's almost like you have to start over. But to your point, that's another process.
Yeah, I think again, the evaluation of contracts, AI can help here. They're going to be looking at these by the thousands, and there can be some nice tools available to the Deloitte people, that small team of people, to actually evaluate a contract's legitimacy. I can get that. That's understandable, and I think can be accomplished if they really want to work at it. I just don't know how they're going to follow every athlete and every deal and make sure they comply. I think once many individuals or organizations or collectives have given the money to the athlete, I don't see them paying a lot of attention beyond fairly specific things they might ask them to do about compliance. So I think the compliance issue is going to be paramount, and I don't see how that's going to be monitored, how it's going to be done.
Almost like an NIL compliance along with the compliance departments in universities, having to do with when are the days off, tutoring, all those types of things. Might we see another compliance office pop up in athletic departments?
Trev said if people don't follow the rules, there'll be consequences. But again, there were no details behind what he said. He just said that. And I can understand an AD has to say those kind of things. But practically, they're going to hire somebody else. Just as rumors right now are statements about another senior person being added to the staff at Texas A&M Athletics. That's a lawyer, and presumably they will be, working this problem. It's not just one thing; it's many things. NIL is part of it, and to some extent falls outside of the purview of the departments, as far as I can understand the nuances of this. But there are other issues too about this, and again, we have the backdrop of a legal decision by a judge that's been challenged already. So far, the challenges are focused primarily on the past, not the future. So the lawsuits in place right now have looked specifically at the presumed payments by the NCAA to athletes from 2016 to 2024. who did not get fair access to NIL deals. So that's pretty clear what the decision was about that. But those lawsuits have made that money be stopped. That money won't be forthcoming, as far as I can tell yet. Trev mentioned that a bit. He said that in the SEC, there has been a decision made to require each school to pay $2.5 million to these past athletes of NCAA money. So the NCAA will generate the revenue, give it to the school, and they will then in turn, I guess, give it to the athletes that are eligible. But I believe that whole process is on hold right now, pending some resolutions of the lawsuits that have been filed by past athletes. So far, I haven't seen any specific Title IX athletes come out and sue schools on the future revenues. It may just be too soon yet. Too few schools have been very clear about exactly how they're going to pay. In the case of A&M, they have said, we're going to pay athletes from 6 sports, 3 women and 3 men's sports. No mention of anything else, any other money going besides scholarships to equestrian, for example, women's golf, men's golf. We have roster limits already printed up. The roster limits are slightly nuanced in the sense that there's roster limits applied to this fall, and then there's roster limits taking place in 2026. In most cases are the same, but there are a few nuances right there where there'll be, there'll be a small number of shifts year to year there from the 24 to 25, 26 to 26, 27 years of athletic competition. So I think that's fairly minor stuff. But I expect once schools have declared what they're going to pay, there will be some people, current athletes, who will get lawyers and they will sue because of Title IX at least, saying we're not getting a fair share here. Why are these men's sports getting it? Why are these women's sports not getting it? Again, A&M has come up and said, well, it'll be 6 sports, 3 women, 3 men's sports. They've been pretty clear about that. Maybe that's their approach to trying to head off some degree of lawsuit happiness on the part of athletes currently in play that are going to possibly consider suing. There's a lot of lawyers out there, folks, who want to make some money off of this. So I see them convincing players to file lawsuits, not just about the past, but about the future coming up. And that'll be interesting to see how they play out. Will injunctions be issued? Don't know. Right now, it seems like the schools are getting ready to write checks beginning on July 1. We'll see.
2 things jumped out at me that Trev said. Market-based decisions will be based on the revenue. I thought that was interesting. The other one I liked was the fair market NIL deals. Fair market has now been added, by the way, in the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not need as much of that revenue share. That's Texas Tech softball, correct? Along the lines that if there is a benefactor who says, I'm going to give this player or this program, could that help the other programs, Dr. Loftin?
Well, it could. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to watch this happening. And I believe it's going to be very diverse. I don't think you're going to have a lot of uniformity. Again, the one thing I've seen so far from looking at dozens of sort of revealed or fully revealed deals as far as July 1 forward is concerned is that the football is always there. And it's always going to get the lion's share. Again, A&M has not said what they're going to get football, but I bet it'll be close
75%
to 75%.
has kind of been the baseline.
Yeah, that's the baseline I'm hearing everywhere. And it varies a little bit. But you go look at the school. I mean, these aren't Power 4 schools. But look at Gonzaga. Gonzaga is going to presumably join what? The Pac-12, which hasn't got 12 teams. It'll be a non-football member. Okay. They will provide some funding, and the Pac arguably has to be part of the equation here. And they have no football team. So how is that going to look compared to the other members of that particular conference? So there's a lot going on here that we just don't know yet. July 1, I believe most schools are going to be very public about what they're going to do, especially the public institutions. Those are state supported, have to come out and say, here is what's going to happen. A private might try to keep that private. I don't know how easy it's going to be to do, but they may try to do that. But I think right now it's a wait and see thing. We're going to wait and see exactly what is happening in terms of how this revenue is going to be distributed. And I predict quite a variation there. I mean, again, A&M picking only 6 sports may be, I'm going to call it an outlier, but maybe one end of the spectrum of this decision making compared to those that are going to cover everybody to some extent.
This is the thought, and a possible template is 75% to football, 15 to men's basketball, 5 to baseball, 5 to other sports. That's kind of a template. Jon, Dr. Loftin brought up Gonzaga. We understand Gonzaga basketball is big, but people have to realize Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, they may get a little more to share, but the lion's share of the revenue comes from football, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So I think, again, the interesting thing to see with all this, you guys both talked about it, is that, again, I think collectives are here to stay, because collectives are going to be that vehicle that's going to allow schools who have the wherewithal to probably funnel more money that way. And we've obviously seen it from Texas Tech. They've been pretty vocal about it. It's pretty fun out there, particularly on women's softball. But I think those things are going to happen anyways. And I think the NIL deals you're going to be seeing going to Deloitte are going to all be, more non-rev sports probably at the end of the day, and the collectives where it maybe where there's everybody can see there's no way where this player is receiving X amount of money for what he's doing. My guess is they don't get turned in, and those are run through the collective where it's going to be a little shadier when it's all said and done. I think the universities will be transparent, but I think you'll see all the big schools keep a collective, because that's going to be, the way the rules potentially will get fudged through this process.
Okay, here we go. Because of my time in pro, here we go. Because we're going to talk a little bit about tampering, right?
No.
What happens when you go over the quote unquote salary cap? Back to your point, Dr. Loftin, we don't know what the penalties will be. Who's going to go over 18 million or 20.5 million? Or
the salary cap is a cap, not a floor.
but remember, the NBA has now brought in the apron, right?
We'll see how many of those terms translate from pros to the college sports right now. But again, I think the real interesting point here is that this is a cap, but the cap is exclusive of NIL in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so the NIL is going to be a differentiator. The Power Four in general are going to have the donor bases, the size to be able to generate a fair amount. I mean, Texas has already come out and said we're going to have 30+ million available for NIL on top of the 20.5. So I think it's going to be a differentiator in those schools that have the donor bases that can make it happen.
The thing that gets me is you have a lot of people who, yes, waiting for the decision to come down. That's what we were talking about before. But there are a lot of people, I think, behind the scenes, it was going to impact. We're saying, if this happens, then we're going to do this. I don't think they were waiting for the decision to do that. I think they made it all public after that. But I think those wheels were moving, just as the ADs did a year ago in Destin in the SEC, saying there's going to be this many roster spots and this. They didn't wait till this last spring. It was the spring before that to say 105 for football. And there was some argument about this many for the other sports. And I think, Jon, that's got to be that type of forward thinking. If we keep talking about adjusting and adapting, you can't just react to everything that comes out. Trev uses 2 words that I really like: modernization and monetization for this. And I think that's got to be part of the vocabulary.
Yeah, and I think, guys, to kind of clear it, let me put a little bit for our listeners. What's going to happen is that what the NIL, what John Bishop and all those guys are doing, they're out there trying to find corporations that want to put money and to use the name, image, and likeness for their advertisement and support because of the popularity of college athletics. So those are going to be the deals, for the most part, that are going to be legitimate through that process. They're going to be people who are going to want to pay Arch Manning to do so, to do so much. Now, if Arch, again, Arch could be one of the situations, I'll bring all that money in, but don't pay me. I've already got my own deals. I'm going to put that into the pool, let the pool pay more players, just like you see NFL guys and NBA guys constantly restructuring their contract to get under the salary cap so they can put people around them so they can win the ultimate goal, the championship ring, get on their finger. So I think you're going to see some of that eventually evolve too. But the NIL stuff you're hearing there, that's how you get corporations involved with it. That's how you get Dr. Pepper does their deal. So that's going to going to happen. I think the collectives stay there because there are going to be deals that aren't anywhere close to any of that. And that's how the collectives are going to bring more money in to pay the players, particularly, the star players, to keep them at that school and, supplement whatever they're able to do in that standpoint. And there's only a handful of schools that can do that. Fortunately, A&M is one of those. But again, it will be interesting to see what type of thing, when you talk about competitive balance and how this process works. And right now, again, there are no guard rules around this. So it's, again, people are going to be out there doing things that I think Deloitte's going to be, they're not going to be able to police that. NCAA is not going to be able to police that. Really, it boils right down to the only people who can really police that are the conferences and the schools themselves. And will they want to do that when there's an arms race between the Big Ten and the SEC? Don't think so, guys.
Yeah.
Good question, sir. That's my worry. I don't know that there's going to be the will and the mechanisms in play to be able to do the job at the school level. I mean, do they really want to?
Yeah.
There's going to be stuff. We'll talk later on maybe about the UW lawsuit against Miami right now for meddling with their NIL deal. That's going to become probably more common. If people can jump around through the portal without any real constraints, how well can NIL follow them? It depends a lot, I think, on how well those contracts are written. And so far, I haven't seen too many people being penalized for jumping ship and going to the portal, even though they have NIL deals at their original school.
We might as well go there now, right? Because I think this is the first time in this show, I'll have to ask Gabe about the first 48. Have we ever used the phrase tortillas interference before?
Well, it's a term I'm familiar with.
I bet you are. So the University of Wisconsin, tampering suit versus Miami University. Talked about tampering before, saying that Miami intentionally interfered and tampered with a defensive back, Xavier Lucas, who is student athlete A in this lawsuit. Wisconsin blocked him from going into the transfer portal in January. He went to Miami anyway. Here's where, Dr. Loftin, your point. He had signed a 2-year agreement for the NIL, a 2-year revenue sharing contract. And that's where this lawsuit comes in. He enrolled at Miami anyway, without entering the portal. Like, there's a number of things in this lawsuit that I'm finding fascinating.
Yes, and that could be a precursor of what happens more generally among a certain class of student athletes, not just in football, but about other sports too, where you have a star. I mean, think about the Texas Tech pitcher, for example, in softball. People at that level are seeing lots of money being thrown at them right now. And that's lots of money engenders things. Okay. That means they're attractable elsewhere by that. And to what extent can one enforce those kinds of contractual understandings or agreements between a player and a school when that player wants to leave for greener pastures? That's going to be interesting. It'll be, I suspect, lots of legal maneuvering here. We saw the first salvo with Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was blessed, I'm told, by the Big Ten leadership. It wasn't that they did it on their own. They said, we're going to do this. They checked with their commissioner, and they've gotten fully supported by their commissioner and the commissioner's office in their pursuit of a suit against Miami.
John, the tampering part is what's getting me on this, in that he's still at Wisconsin, but it was a pretty famous booster of Miami and a coach with contact. Now, I know he's a Pompano Beach kid from there in South Florida, but he's still with Wisconsin. And if we think this is an isolated incident, we're being really naive here, aren't we?
I don't know how you police tampering. There's so many different ways you can get, in touch with a player. I mean, I'm sure Miami did not talk directly to the kid. All right. So I'm sure that didn't happen, but you have so many agents or folks out there that are representing and do different things. And again, tampering is going to be here. Tampering's been here as long as the NCAA has been in. It's going to be here long past. So again, I don't know how you legislate tampering in any fashion or form. I mean, the only thing I think you can do is that if you can figure out, what are there penalties for, people, again, contractual laws, which got to take place on this. If you sign a contract and at some point, and that's a binding agreement between two parties, and somebody breaks that without any, without any right or a reason to, then you're going to have these contractual issues. And I think again, if I'm the Big 12, or the Big 10, I'm supporting this only because someone's going to sue somebody at some point. Let's see what happens here, and let's get ahead of that and see what we can learn from this process. So I think again, this one does seem pretty, cut and cleared. I think the other interesting thing is the kid didn't go through the portal; he dropped out. So that's got some, or he withdrew from school. So I think that's got some different, that's not been part and parcel of the conversation to date. And the other thing was, I think I read somewhere that his lawyer, this guy, Darren Heitner, has been pretty involved in this process, said the House hadn't taken effect yet. So none of these things were valid until it was. So, why are you suing me for something that hadn't even taken effect yet? So you've got a timing issue there too. So as these things all, come down to at the end of the day, there's usually a loophole or some unintended consequences that somebody reads that wasn't really the intent or the spirit, but the way it was written, they can find a way to get around it. Believe me, I've been involved in a few of those cases over the years. So, it happens. So I think again, it's all in the court of law right now. What the heck? Let's see what they come up with and say, because that's ultimately the driving factor right now that universities are following the result of these lawsuits.
Once again, you bring up the unintended consequences podcast I want to come up with.
Sports lawyer just a few days ago came out with a very interesting headline for his, or title for his article, and it said, "The bag man is back."
Yeah.
The bag man is back. We're old enough to remember those days when there were bag men who were the ones that carried the cash. In one case, paper sacks of cash that donors gave, not necessarily to the coach directly, but sort of in the coach's purview to pay players with. That goes back a long ways. There's been many coaches caught in that process. I know some of them personally as well as you do that. Yes, but here we have the bag man is back.
Yeah.
And that's why back to our original premise here. How will we actually see enforcement proceed here? I just don't see it. I mean, lawsuits are pretty difficult means of enforcement. They take time and money and lots of oftentimes pain to be able to work through. So I don't know that, people won't wait for that. I mean, football's here soon here in August. And we can't wait for that. So I believe we're going to see a lot more going on under the tables than we ever saw, basically, at least in principle, saw during the height of the NCAA issues trying to manage all that and penalize people. Even NCAA took long times to be able to go through their infractions process to be able to penalize a coach or a school. And we've seen some take many years. I mean, Coach Sherrill's lawsuits just really got resolved fairly recently in the last year after all the time that went by with those things hanging out there. So again, it's not a very rapid process here. In principle, the penalties, if we can enforce them through the school, through the conference, or NCAA, could be much quicker, much more rapidly applied. But I don't know if we have a good history of that either.
Like, does he play at Miami? Does he have to go back to Wisconsin? Yeah. Is it void?
We're talking about this is 2 months away, guys. This isn't very far away.
Yeah. I mean, he was eligible at Miami. Yeah. Again, John brings up a point. As a student,
he'll be playing at Miami.
Yeah, I think so. I think no matter what the lawsuit does, they can't. I can't see a judge putting in I guess it was probably filed in Wisconsin. I can't see a Wisconsin judge putting an injunction on a school down in Florida to stop a particular player from playing. I don't think that's going to happen. I guess it could. Then you can argue about the jurisdictions and the appellate processes and things like that. But again, I can't see the guy not playing beginning in the end of August here, 2 months away.
Should we stay in the courts, Dr. Loftin?
We could.
I said what's next and what's now. I think it's what's been. This goes back to 2017, and it involves endowed seats in the 12th Man Foundation here at Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, I was president as we began a major redevelopment of Kyle Field that cost upwards of $500 million to do. And in the process of doing that, the 12th Man Foundation, which is the arm that actually provides ticketing and provides funding for athletics, scholarships, things like that of various kinds, facilities and such. They had already revised their process for donors in terms of recognition, in terms of giving them access to perks, if you will. And so one of Crew's priority points through the process of giving money to the 12-Man Foundation beyond the cost of a ticket. And that caught on as a real way to assign seating, assign prioritization of various kinds. And that goes back, again, before even football did it. But certainly football brought along some things. There's a gentleman who no longer is with us, Harry Green. I think both of you guys knew Harry Green. I certainly knew him well, knew his wife as well, Nelda. Harry was the guy who began a process of soliciting donations for endowed scholarships. And in return for that, promised individual donors they would have either in perpetuity or at least for some lengthy period of time, the guarantee of their seats and the guarantee of their parking at football. And that alone was an attractive thing for many people. I have a lot of friends that Harry talked to. The problem is that many of those deals were not written down. They were handshake agreements. And so we have the situation where Kyle Fields were developed. There was an enforcement of a reseating. So people who had been in certain seats for a long period of time all of a sudden weren't there anymore. And they resented that. Their parking space was no longer available to them. And so I think it was what we had here. We had 16 families, about 30 people total here, filed a lawsuit. And it was filed finally in 2017, sometime after this really was done. And the 12-Man Foundation worked really hard to get that lawsuit dismissed and have a summary judgment. But Judge Wise, just a couple of days ago, locally here at Bryan College Station, ruled that lawsuit can go forward. So now that means we'll have depositions. How they'll depose Harry Green, I don't know. He's no longer with us. In fact, several members of the plaintiff group have also died. These are not young people; they're my age people, okay, or older, and so they're dying away too. So who will pursue these things? Who do you actually depose to get information about this? Will a court, will a jury accept a handshake agreement as binding? There's evidence that can be done. Sometimes it's not done. So it's going to be interesting to watch this play out. I happen to serve on the board of a nonprofit here at Bryan College Station, and I sit next to an attorney for one of the plaintiffs right now. And so we talk about that occasionally. But I think it'll take, again, a long time for this to wind its way out. The amount of money here involved is not insignificant, but it's not huge. And so they put the value the plaintiffs have at $4.5 million of the loss they've encountered by not being able to have their seats renewable in perpetuity, their parking renewable in perpetuity, and so on. So I think this is an issue. The 12-Man Foundation, after all this sort of began, has really established rule sets that prevent it from happening again, likely, but they have to deal with this suit from the past. And your guess is as good as mine how far this will go and whether it be resolvable or not. But anyway, it's one of those things that's real. And I think that's not unique to Texas A&M. I think any university of history and of consequence is going to have made deals long in the past with donors, and how well you honor them can be an issue. If you're a new donor, will you like the fact that it wasn't honored in the past? But rules change, people change. Like my story about the Georgia foundations, University of Georgia foundations here, and sometimes somebody has to die to be able to make it go. And they happen here too.
John, we move on to the new, I guess, Pacific Athletic Conference, Pac-12, it's still called. And as Dr. Loftin mentioned earlier, 8 schools, 7 play football, looking for an 8th. Anyway, they signed a deal with CBS, and CBS will carry at least 3 games on the network channel, also use CBS Sports Network and Paramount Plus, but a new media rights deal on the television side for the Pac-12.
I think they need to rebrand that the state college or the state conference.
The Pac State.
The Pac State, you know.
Gonzaga, guys, Gonzaga.
Gonzaga State. They're going to change the name.
They don't play football, so they don't count. So,
Okay.
So, but I think this was inevitable to come from the moment it would happen out there. I do give Washington State and Oregon State, probably a lot of credit because I think this is probably the best thing that they could have ended up with. In lieu of being put into to the Big Ten at some point. So I think they've been kind of scrambling from the get-go through this process. One of the benefactors for them were here you've got two different entities that were kind of lost a lot of their college football prowess when the Pac-12 broke up and abandoned Washington State and Oregon State, and when CBS lost the SEC. That took a significant chunk out of their marquee product over the years. So I think you had two entities that were trying to find, the best possible solution. And I think, again, what this has done, it's solidified the conference. So there's still some money in there. They're able to keep the Pac-12 name. Again, I don't know what all of the details are there, but obviously there is again, it was important for that league to continue to exist in some fashion or form because through their NCAA relationships and the CFP relationships and the NCAA men's basketball tournament, there was revenue that's coming to them that they're able to probably control. That's going to help them, navigate or adjust to this new landscape. The interesting thing from the TV side of it is you look at it here, from what I've been able to tell, looking at this Pac-12 deal, a 5-year deal, puts it ends up probably right before the majority of the other deals end up. So it kind of gives them first bite at the apple, if you will, when the new process comes together. And again, it's going to change dramatically in terms of platforms and distribution, over the next 5 years. So, it'll be difficult to predict that today. But again, if you look at it in today's dollars, the Pac-12, the reconstituted Pac-12, those schools now are going to get $8 to $10 million from that process. So that puts them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like sixth right now that I look at and the way that the conferences are distributing television revenue, bowl revenue, et cetera. And, they're just above, I think Conference USA, Sun Belt, they're above them. But the Atlantic Athletic Coast, they're the AAC, they're at $11 million right now. So I think one of the things they can say is, if there is a Power 4, do we make it a Power 5 now because of where that falls into? Probably not, because if you look at the Big Four right now, the Big Ten, and again, this is not quite apples to apples, but figure about the television revenue with their media partners. Big Ten schools are going to get roughly $71 million next year. Our SEC, 52, but the 52 million doesn't include a ninth game, conference game or potential some of these alignments that they're talking about doing some crossover games or conference challenges. So there's probably more on the horizon for the SEC when it's all said and done. Notre Dame comes in at 50 million, and that doesn't include any of that, and that includes some of the money they get from the Atlantic Coast Conference. The ACC comes in at roughly 45 million. The Big 12 now gets to 32 million, and then you've got the AAC, which comes in at about 11 million. So you can certainly see the separation there. But I do think, again, it keeps the Pac-12 from going, defunct, but it does barely put them above that group of 5 out there that are, they're a little bit better than the Sun Belt. They're a little bit better than Conference USA, et cetera. And they're relatively close to what the American Athletic Conference is getting. So I think all in all, those guys probably did pretty good to get that deal where they is and with the money's in. Now, there's probably a couple of other bucks coming in because they didn't announce all the deals yet. I think, again, they had a CW deal last year that my sources tell me that will probably still stay in there as a linear component for what they've done for that product. And I think, again, they see some value in that. And there are going to be some other streaming deals in there, too, probably when it's all said and done. So, again, I think they, all things considered, they probably did the best they could with the hand that they were dealt. And again, having a partner like CBS who's going to continue to put them in that linear broadcast environment, that's big for them for their championship game. I think what you said, 3 football games are in that mix, and they've got
at the very least close to the championship,
small games in there too. So, I mean, all things considered, in this environment, I think they came out, it's probably best they could.
It's almost like the
question for you,
reworked
John, if I could ask a few things about this. CBS seemed to be left behind compared to ESPN and the other older broadcasters. Is this their main deal now going forward for college sports? Will this be their
Well,
next
their main
sure.
deal is obviously the men's basketball tournament. So they're partners with that with Turner. So that's going to be their big thing, I think for the next several years. And I think for CBS, getting Gonzaga in was big for them because that's a basketball power. They have other basketball, content that they can deliver there, but that helps them with the regular season mix. And I think that losing the SEC was a blow to them. I mean, I don't, and I think will they ever be back to where they were? Probably not in terms of, at least on the college athletic side, at least in this current round of television deals. But, it keeps them in the game. They've got Paramount Plus, which is an important, so their streaming content to there. I mean, the CBS Sports Network, primarily a linear play. But again, this eats up innings. It gives them some more content in there, and so probably keeps them on the cable lineup and the cable bundle, so they can still receive some revenue from that. So, I think from CBS's perspective, this is probably a deal that they're probably going to make money on when it's all said and done, I think. So again, they're not paying the SEC the big dollar, and again, they weren't paying them the big dollars anyways, but for them to stay in the game for the SEC, that was going to be a significant chunk, and they're going through a sale right now too. So a lot of these broadcast legacy companies kind of have to manage the balance sheet, to kind of, we only kind of see it from the media side and the content, but also in the, in the boardroom, they're trying to balance their budget, keep their shareholders happy, et cetera. So again, from my perspective, and there's probably a few more things to come out. There's probably I've read about there's some rev sharing components in there that could potentially be tied to streaming and how many more subscribers they could potentially grow. So I think, again, there's probably some upside for the schools, probably not a tremendous amount, but there's some there that, again, will kind of hopefully keep them working together and working together to maximize their schedule. And again, I think bringing in a Texas State, even though you think, again, who would have ever thought Texas State could be in the Pac-12? But it's happened, and I think, again, that just shows the power of the market of Texas right now, that they're looking for them, and there are other schools out there that probably have probably deserve it more just from an overall athletic performance standpoint, but they don't bring the market of Texas to the table. So kudos to Texas State for being in the right place at the right time.
You've answered one of my other questions, which is Texas State the logical one? It seems to be right now. That's what I'm hearing. You're hearing the same thing I'm hearing right now. But back to the CBS deal. I mean, as I've read this and seen it being discussed, it's not clear. Will CBS make a decision week to week on whether they use Paramount Plus to stream it out only, or for a game, or will they actually put it on the big CBS, put it on broadcast? You see any way they'll make decisions about that and how it'll be divided up?
Yeah, I think they're gonna, they're guys that look at the schedule, and again, you see that the SEC and the big boys announce their schedule usually right before the spring meetings, 1st of May. Here's your season opener, here's where your non-conference games fall. Then they keep the other games kind of available to kind of see when they should fall in. But they can probably look at the schedule and guess which games right now, accurately are going to probably be the 3 games that they would like to put on the, on the CBS affiliate. I haven't looked at their schedule, but if I did, I could probably pretty accurately, probably with 90% certainty, probably identify the 3 games that they would be looking at right now to do that for. But they probably keep a window. If Texas State goes undefeated, let's say, and all of a sudden they become, the country's darling, all of a sudden they'll probably have the ability to move some of those things around and take advantage of that. But certainly when Oregon State plays Washington State, that's going to be a game they're going to put on the network. So, and again, if they're playing some other conference schools at home, outside, particularly from a Big Ten and SEC standpoint, those games will get picked up and put in that window too. So,
you can see Washington State, possibly, even though they're not conference, and the Civil War always out there.
That's a big game.
But to your point, as you said, Texas State goes undefeated. San Diego State with its program, if Fresno gets resurrected, and my thought is, it gives them a nice doubleheader window as well, and a natural doubleheader for them with that Big Ten game being first, and then a Pac-12 game as a second game in that doubleheader.
Yeah, so it does. It gives them, and at that point in time, when they're selling advertising, they need to kind of spread those investments across multiple games, and that gives them an opportunity to sell, to bring that average unit rate down to something more manageable for companies to invest in them from a television standpoint. It makes sense to have those additional games, and they'll be able to sell across multi-platforms on that versus the CBS Sports Network and Paramount Plus as well.
That old Pac-12 network, are they going to utilize some of that equipment, and maybe not for their broadcast, but possibly social media that way? But it's not in the same markets. I get that, but I wonder if some of that carries over into this deal as well.
You know what? I didn't see that, but I think again the Pac-12 still controls all that. So I mean, it may be sitting dormant now, but again, can they repurpose some of those facilities? Possibly. I think again, I'd certainly look at that as an option because again, if they're going to get one of the things we haven't seen yet is how many other events on their campuses are going to be televised. And we haven't seen anything for women's basketball, women's softball, etc. So if they could use that content for the schools to produce that, and then they can stream it, a la ESPN's game plan with the SEC network and the ACC network, then that makes some sense too. So I would imagine they would probably look to exploit those facilities and try to create some, produce those events at minimal dollars.
John, I've often thought this, that the Pac-12 is a fascinating study for a sport management class. Isn't it? Like, it's amazing that transformation of missed opportunities and sometimes swinging too big.
Yeah, I mean, again, from a revisionist history standpoint, if they could have probably latched on when Larry Scott made the decision not to partner with any of the primary distributors in that cable bundle back in the day, and they'd have gone with a partner, and ESPN probably would have done it, they'd probably still be around today in the fashion that we know them. But in the world that happened quickly, and then when the Big Ten came a calling, and that started to unravel. I mean, just like the Southwest Conference, this is a similar story there. Back when that demise happened. I mean, your conference of champions now has gone to a conference of schools with state in their last name. And I think I've told you the story back in Fox's early days, and we were overseeing the Cotton Bowl. Whatever the message was, we don't want any team with Tech or State playing in the bowl game. So that's the vision of the brands that you're talking about. And none of these schools have a true brand that's going to resonate across the country, again, unless there's some type of Cinderella story on any given year, which could happen. San Diego State a couple years ago was in basketball, getting to the Final Four. Those are things they're hopefully betting on that will help give them some more value as time goes on. And if I'm San Diego State, I get to keep all that revenue now versus sharing it with my conference members by making the tournament from what I do.
Right. That was a big one, was it not? Being able to keep the revenue for so many years.
Yeah. At least 5. I think it's 5 to 7.
I think it's 5 to 6. For that.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a reworked Mountain West Conference deal for CBS and CBS Sports Network.
Yeah. So they were familiar with each other. So that had been something they had been doing, and that they'd seen where it had worked for them. The time slots, like you've talked about, having those West Coast time slots. Again, if you're CBS, being able to counter program, with their Big Ten game too. I think that's going to be benefit to them. Again, a lead in, a lead out, etc.
So the Big Ten is not a 2 time zone or 1 time zone conference anymore. The Big Ten will have games which will be either far east or far west, which makes it a little more complicated, I think, to make these things fit together well. I'm sure smart people will figure this thing out, but I see it being difficult to balance.
Well, they're not going to try. They can't put all those games in the double. It's just 3 plus a championship.
Yeah.
So if that one Big Ten game, UCLA,
and that's why I guess you can
USC
back out. And only got 3 games to worry about. It's not a big deal then.
Yeah, they'll figure out. That was important to them probably when they announced that deal first. Just so that everybody could kind of socialize it and understand it. Now they'll be announcing some other deals. I think again this was done by design by them, and let's announce our big one first with CBS, and then probably CW next, and then there'll be another streaming component that'll be part and parcel. That's all done to get a number of events that they're going to say televised. We're going to televise over 1,000 hours of Pac-12 programming. That could be doable based on again who's streaming what, and again a lot of those Olympic sports.
I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, but then again, it's a podcast, so I'm going to say it. If we love the MAC, and that's created its own term, MACtion, does the Pac-12 almost dive into Pac-12 after dark? Because the reputation was that late game had something that was going to be seen that had never been seen before.
I think you're going to see them lean into that brand because that's a brand that most college sport fans are familiar with. If you mention that to them, they've heard of it. So again, it's you hate to use the term authentic, but it is authentic out there. It may just be the same brand, different players, but I think you'll see. I would certainly lean into that if that was part of my marketing strategy for the conference.
It'd be a lot of fun. Certainly would.
And you can brand
we need to get Kirk Schultz on this podcast sometime. Kirk is
Washington
just
State
stepped down as the Washington State president.
Yeah.
He's still very prominent in the sports world because he was the NCAA person, things like that. But I do know him. He was actually very instrumental and our arriving at a reasonable settlement with the Big 12 on our departure there. So he and I worked that independently of the other negotiators from the Big 12. And I viewed him as a very smart, very together guy and very knowledgeable about how sports really work. So he's one of those exceptional people, the top levels of college leadership, which I think figured out how sports work.
Yeah,
That would be a fascinating conversation because we focus on the
I'll
teams that
talk to him
went to the
about that.
Big Ten, but we don't focus on how Washington State and Oregon State have had, and they've done a nice job of navigating all of this.
yeah. No,
Well, clearly following the money was part of what they had to do.
Yeah. I mean, for a while there was the Pac-2.
Yeah, it's 2-pack.
The 2-pack.
Well, still, I mean, they still got to get an 8th team for football. They don't have it yet. To get by next year, they have to have at least 8 football teams in play to be able to recognize as a conference. So it's not like it's all done yet.
Isn't that going to be Texas State, though, assuming they accept the offer?
Well, Texas State seems to be the logical candidate. Memphis was mentioned for quite a while. They seem to have made peace with their, and they still have dreams of being in a Power 4 conference. You know that, guys.
Yeah.
So I think that's the problem right now is Texas State the right one? What's the cost going to be? Who's going to pay the bills? Things like that. But that seems to be the betting man's place right now is Texas State. But there were other schools in the conversation, especially Memphis at one time in terms of being that 8th member. And then the question becomes, given how big the SEC and the Big Ten have become, is an 8 football team conference viable, guys? That's the other question I want to ask you about.
And does it stop at 8?
Well, I think it cannot stop, but is it viable to be at 8? That's the question I'm asking you right now.
That's a fair question, Dr. Loftin.
I think all things considered, they can kind of hang around at least till the next TV deal's up. See what that looks like.
That's my thought, John. Is we're kind of just schools are just trying to keep it together till 2031.
Right. Yeah. So I think again, this gives them at least some certainty that they're getting some media revenue. They've got probably some creative. Again, if you're only at 8 conference games, how do you schedule those other games? Could they be some ways that they could generate some additional revenue on that? You know, they're again, it's not going to get them anywhere near what the SEC or Big Ten are doing, but you know, every little bit helps in this day and age for these schools and how they're going to be managing their budgets going forward. And again, who knows, again, if Texas State has some big donors out there, this is something really that they want to kind of dive into. And my guess is they probably do. You know, again, I credit, again, we've talked about this before, what Texas Tech has done for those guys, you know, where they've come up and stepped up and put money into their program. I think, again, I didn't even realize this, but they won more Big 12 championships, but they were close to than double anybody else in the Big 12 right now. So if they continue that level of competition and that level of performance on the field, that puts them at a really great spot, you know, in the next 5 years when we play musical chairs again.
Yeah, it's not going to be just market size any longer, right?
Yeah.
As we talked about, they become a brand. And the power of Patrick Mahomes behind them.
Absolutely.
Right? That doesn't hurt.
Leading into it. I mean,
so guys, how do you see this playing out? That we have clearly a Power 4 arrangement right now. We have the 4 major conferences right now. You've already said pretty well clearly, John, that the Pac will not fit into this Power 4 to become a Power 5 again member. Are they a group of 5? I mean, what is the Pac-12 going to be? Where's the Mountain West in? I mean, we have a group of 5 out there, which may be a little bit, maybe group of 6, group of 5. I don't know what's it going to be, guys.
You know what? I think again, once you get, I mean, you got the big 2, and then you probably got the next 2, and then you've got others receiving votes. And how do they work their way around to try to work their way up the poll a little bit when it's all said and done? So it's going to be interesting. Then you got Notre Dame out there as an outlier, you know, and again, what they're doing in terms of what they're generating from a school perspective, you know, puts them on par with the SEC right now, probably a little bit higher. So it's going to be interesting out there. But to Andrew's point, I think, again, these brand names now are going to be things that where it's really going to start to, and how do you create that brand? But again, a guy like Patrick Mahomes playing at Tech, if you follow the NFL now and you were not part, I mean, I bet more people can probably identify globally now Texas Tech then you know they're probably definitely behind Texas and Texas A&M right now, and probably at their heels if people don't follow sports. But everybody knows Mahomes.
Amen to that.
It's exactly what they do.
So guys, you mentioned it already, Notre Dame. I'm going to the game in September.
Hey, so am I.
So my request to you, Andrew.
Okay.
If it's really hot in South Bend,
Yeah.
can I sneak up to your place?
Yeah.
And be in the AC.
Yeah. You're in. You're in. That's all you had to say. Deal. But you got to be my spotter. And the last time I checked, everyone says Monaco's a diva. So you have to deal with that.
Now, I'll also be at the Missouri game this fall, which will be played in Missouri. It's one of those rare things when A&M plays Missouri.
Yeah.
I will be sitting in the club there because I got good friends in Missouri still who haven't forgotten me. So there I may just wander up.
Reconfigured stadium, right?
Well, I'm not sure they'll be totally, and they're doing a lot of work on. They did the south end zone after I left and got that pretty well under control. And now they're working on the north end zone, and I'm not sure if that's going to be done in time for football this fall. It'll be usable, but I mean it won't be finished. I don't believe with the new suites, things like that, totally in there. That's my understanding.
Similar to Vanderbilt, right? Vanderbilt's been upgrading its football.
Well, Vanderbilt's problem is just size. I mean, I've been to games at Vanderbilt where the opposing team was totally outnumbering the Vanderbilt fans in the stadium. It's not a big stadium. There's not a lot of local excitement about Vanderbilt football.
Hey, their quarterback just said they run Tennessee.
Yeah.
And when Diego Pave is now in his 17th season, I think they'll finally get there. So.
Well, the one thing you got to do, guys, you need to go to Vanderbilt for a basketball game. That's still the weirdest place to watch basketball from the sideline I've ever been at in my life because of the levels that you have to deal with.
Try doing a game there, Dr. Loftin.
It's supposed to be difficult. You must get has duty pay for that, Monaco?
There's some things I miss, and if there's not a monitor, thank God it's radio.
You're lucky enough.
Yeah.
You and Thornton have a good time with that.
Yeah, there are some players who probably weren't even on the roster who scored in a couple of those games because it was the first name I could come up with. It is the biggest challenge, and by time you get used to that broadcast angle, the game's over. Yeah. And the good news is you're not going back used to be every 2 years. Now the way basketball is a different schedule, it's not always a guarantee. But I always say this: I don't have to do every game there. That's where I really tell the Vanderbilt.
Well,
folks.
the Vandy chancellors I've known have thought of that as an advantage. They thought other teams come in there and they can't figure it out until the end of the game. Therefore, we have an advantage over you.
It's odd because the benches are on the baselines, not the sidelines, but you have your two coaches on the side. Yeah, exactly. It's that old auditorium. It's a great building. Yeah. It's a wonderful building, not for basketball.
Well, it could be that Gordon Gee's widow may have designed all that stuff when she was high one day. I don't know.
That's another topic for another show.
Exactly.
Pleasure, my friends. Thank you so much. Very, very, very fun episode. We'll see you on the next one. Dr. Loftin, Jon Heidtke, thank you very much. Nick Savage is the producer of College Sports Follow the Money. And we thank you so much for joining us. I'm Andrew Monaco. So long, everybody.